The other day I was driving and I heard Garrison Keillor on the radio in the morning. He does this lovely thing with the poetry in the morning. And he gave a quote from Henrik Ibsen, who wrote Enemy of the People, which you should read. If you haven't read that and you're interested in fluoridation, you should definitely read that. But he gave a quote from ghosts. It's not only what we have inherited from our father and mother that walks in us, it is all sorts of dead ideas and lifeless old beliefs and so forth. They have no vitality, but they cling to us all the same, and we cannot shake them off. Whenever I take up a newspaper, I seem to see ghosts gliding between the lines. There must be ghosts all the country over, as thick as the sands of the sea. And then we are, one and all, so pitifully afraid of the light. And I would suggest to you that our professional bodies, our departments of health, our people in public health are pitifully afraid of the light because they want to hang on to this fossilized belief system that fluoridation actually works and is good for us. So, with that as preamble, in my presentation I will give you the 4 simple facts and one realization that opened my mind in 1996. This is after I read what my wife gave me. Secondly, the better ways of fighting tooth decay. The events that have made fluoridation obsolete. Estimating a safe dose of fluoride to protect children from lowered IQ. And lastly, how can we end fluoridation? The 4 simple facts and one realization that opened my mind in 1996. Number 1, there's not a single process in the human body that needs fluoride to function properly. And I speak as my main training has been a biochemist. Not one single biological, biochemical reaction in the human body needs fluoride. It's not an essential nutrient. Sometimes the other side will say that, but it is not. And they have no evidence to back up that it is a nutrient. On the other hand, it's very clear that there are many biological processes which are interfered with by fluoride, always given the adequate concentration, of course. That's always a caveat. But we know that fluoride inhibits enzymes, switches on G proteins, does all kinds of things. It's not something that you want in your body, if you can possibly avoid it. The single most important fact for me was this one: how extremely low the level of fluoride is in mother's milk. 0.004 parts per million. Now the other side sometimes says, oh, fluoride is everywhere, it's in all the water supplies, it's in the sea, yes, yes. Don't you realize then what a stupid thing this is? Because nature has told you that the baby does not need fluoride. Are you telling me after millions of years of evolution that every pregnant woman, every mother in the world has an inadequate supply of fluoride for her baby? That somehow that nature has screwed up on baby's first meal? I do not believe it. And I do not believe that a bunch of dentists in Chicago knows more about what the baby needs than Mother Nature herself. You know, I actually gave somebody, the chief health officer of Victoria in Australia, I said, tell me, Dr. Hill, I think it was Hill, Dr. Hill, if fluoride was good for the baby, it was important for the baby's development, teeth or anything, why is it so low in mother's milk? You know what he said? So Mother Nature has dealt some children a raw deal. What this means, of course, in practical terms, is that a bottle-fed baby in a fluoridated community like Seattle is getting between 175 and 300 times the fluoride dose that nature intended. This is the most serious thing that we're doing right now. A huge gamble was taken in 1950 when the US Public Health Service endorsed fluoridation. Not only had one single trial had not been completed, but they had no idea that what fluoride would do to the baby's bones, the baby's brains, the baby's endocrine system. No idea at all. And yet they went ahead. That's a huge, reckless gamble. The government has the audacity to give us this legacy. The legacy of this practice for every single one of you here is a lifelong, up to this point, a lifelong accumulation of fluoride in your bones. And they really don't know. Again, it's another gamble. They really don't know if the levels of fluoride in your bones are going to reach the levels which they do in India and China and cause horrible symptoms. The first symptoms of fluoride poisoning of the bones is just like arthritis, stiffness of the joints, pains in the joints, pains in the bones. And as it accumulates still further, the bones get harder and more brittle. And we still don't have anybody in the United States who's had 70, 80, 90 years of this fluoride accumulating in their bones. What we know is that 40 to 60% of the fluoride is excreted by the kidney each day, but the rest accumulates in our bones and is steadily increasing over a lifetime. The realization is simple. We should never use the public water supply to deliver medical treatment. We've never done it with any other substance. Nutrient, mineral, medicine, we've never used the public water supply as a delivery system for these things. Why? Because once you put it in the water, you can't control the dose. That's absolutely essential. Everybody knows that. Every time you go to the doctor, you get a prescription. What do they tell you? Take 3 tablets a day or whatever. Secondly, you can't control who gets the medicine. It's totally indiscriminate. It goes to people with poor diet, with poor health. It goes to babies. It goes to the very old. It goes to people that already have compromised because they've got low iodine intake or they've got poor kidney function. It goes to everybody. Completely indiscriminate once you put it in the water. It violates the individual's right to informed consent to medication. Unethical. Unethical. This is well established. Go to the webpage of the American Medical Association and read about what informed consent requires. And what is happening is that Seattle right now is doing to every citizen in Seattle what a doctor in Seattle could do to no individual patient. Say, I've got some real good stuff in here, drink it, it's going to be good for you. And you say, doctor, I don't really want to do that. You say, you do it. I'm telling you, you should do it. If you put any pressure on the patient to take that, he could lose his license or she could lose her license. Absolutely preposterous. So many things are preposterous about this. And when you get to the end of it, your judgment is going to be, is this guy Connett preposterous? Is he crazy? Are these other opponents of fluoridation crazy? Or has my government gone crazy? Could I possibly believe that the Center of Disease Control, the American Medical Association, the American Dental Association, the World Health Organization, all the professional bodies, the American Public Health Association, have they all got this wrong? It's preposterous. Yeah, I hope I can convince you at the end I'm not the preposterous one. What's been going on for 68 years in this country is preposterous, and what's more, it's a massive betrayal of the public's trust. A massive betrayal of the public's trust. This is what Queensland Health said teeth look like from a fluoridated community. And this is what teeth look like without exposure to fluoridated water. That is fraud. That is fraud. What they've taken there is baby bottle tooth decay, which fluoridation can no way reduce that effect. The better ways of fighting tooth decay. The vast majority of countries do not fluoridate their water. And guess what? Here we go. 97% of Europe does not fluoridate its water. 4 of those countries fluoridate their salt. But according to the World Health Organization, tooth decay in 12-year-olds is coming down as fast in fluoridated countries as non-fluoridated countries. So here is tooth decay then coming down from, in this case, the 70s to the 2010. These countries are all fluoridated. And in these countries, they tell people, look at tooth decay here. Since we started fluoridation, look, the tooth decay is dramatically dropping. That's why fluoridation is so successful. Then you go to these countries which are non-fluoridated, and the tooth decay is coming down just as fast, if not faster. A better strategy. Most of the tooth decay is concentrated in low-income families. 80% of the tooth decay in the United States occurs in about 20% of the population. And this is the population of low-income families. So they're right to target these families, they've just got the wrong strategy. Now we need to target those families with better dental education and better diets. And they do not need to swallow a substance that could put them in greater disadvantage, because fluoride's toxic effects are made worse by poor diet, something I've already mentioned. Everyone agrees that fluoride's benefits are mainly topical. Thus, it makes much more sense to provide topical treatments, either in the form of fluoride varnishes or in the form of simply brushing with fluoridated toothpaste. Simple stuff. Better still, I would encourage the use of xylitol toothpaste. Xylitol is a natural sugar, and we produce it in our own bodies at about 15 grams a day. This sugar prevents the bacteria that cause tooth decay from sticking to a surface, and they wither away. So it's a nice bactericide, if you like, because it hurts them but doesn't hurt us. It's been used successfully in Scandinavia and Japan for many, many, many years. So in Wichita, Kansas right now, they're experimenting giving children xylitol mints, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, specifically targeting schools in low-income areas. And it's working. Now in Scotland cannot fluoridate, but the Scottish government opted in 2005 a dental plan called the Child Smile Program. And what they're doing in this program is school-based toothbrushing schemes. They teach kids how to brush their teeth in nursery schools. They're offering healthy snacks and drinks to the children. They are giving oral health advice to children and families on healthy weaning, diet, teething, and toothbrushing, annual checkups and treatment if required, and then finally fluoride varnish applications. This is all from the Scottish government. The proportion of children aged 4 to 6 without obvious dental decay has risen from 42.3% in 1996 to 67% in 2012. And this is attributed to toothbrushing, those early lessons. The proportion of children aged 10 to 12 without obvious dental decay rose from 52.9% in 2005 to 69.4% in 2011 and 72.8% in 2013. They are way ahead of their target. Their target was like a 70%. They're over that already. And this is a very simple, very elegant program. And we're talking now low-income kids in places like Glasgow. Glasgow researchers found that the scheme had reduced the cost of treating dental disease in 5-year-olds by more than half between 2001 and 2010. This is just one country in Europe. Most of Europe is not fluoridated. Before they spend another penny of money to promote this practice, we're talking about the Center of Disease Control that spends millions of taxpayers' dollars each year promoting this practice. They should take a fraction of that money, go to Europe, and find what they're doing in Europe to fight tooth decay successfully without forcing fluoride in everybody's drinking water. That would be a good use of taxpayers' money. In short, our kids need more brushing, more fruit and vegetables, less sugar. Less sugar means less tooth decay and less obesity. Less obesity means less diabetes, fewer heart attacks. In other words, education to promote less sugar is very good investment. You put the two campaigns together, fight tooth decay, fight obesity in the same stroke. Yank those soft drinks out of schools and do everything we can to educate parents to cut down on the sugar crap that they get all day long. We need education, not fluoridation, to fight tooth decay and obesity. Part 3, the events that have made fluoridation obsolete. There are quite a number of them, some more serious than others. Event 1, but starting in 1982, appeared in a number of leading journals like Science and Nature, articles which indicated that tooth decay was no different in fluoridated and non-fluoridated communities. And these articles, Leverett in Science in 82, Cahoon 84, 85, 87, his work was done in New Zealand, Dissendorf in Australia in Nature in 1986, Gray in Canada. All these articles look at, strangely, finding the little difference in tooth decay between those communities with or without fluoridation. And then, if you like, to put this matter to rest, the National Institute of Dental Research, which is a big promoter of fluoridation, big research body, spends a huge amount of money researching fluoridation on teeth. They did a massive survey, 86 to 87. They looked at 39,000 children in 84 communities. And it was finally published in 1990 by Brunel and Carlos, both of who worked for the NIDR. And what they did is that they looked at decayed, missing, and filled permanent tooth surfaces, a measure which we call DMFS. In this study, they found on average, for children 5 to 17, the average tooth decay, as measured by decayed, missing, and filled surfaces, was 2.8 surfaces in the fluoridated communities. This is children who always lived in a fluoridated community. And here the children always lived in a non-fluoridated community, 3.4. Take 2.8 from 3.4 and you've got 0.6. So the saving that they found in this massive study cost the taxpayers nearly $4 million to do this massive survey. All they could come up with was a saving of 0.6 of one tooth surface in a child's mouth out of 128 tooth surfaces. That's what all the angst is about. When we start to hear about the risks, go back to this and see whether you think saving on average 0.6 of a tooth surface could possibly justify some of the risks I'm going to be talking about. But I should add one more thing. Not only is this 0.6, in my view, miserably small, but it wasn't even shown to be statistically significant. And Kathleen Thiessen a couple of years ago looked at the statistics and found it wasn't statistically significant. Incredible. Now, that was a US government-funded study, and this is another US government study. The first one was one of the biggest studies. This second one is a small study, but very precise. This was part of the Iowa study, where they've been tracking children from birth, following a whole bunch of parameters on children from birth. And they decided to use the data here to calculate what was the level of fluoride that a kid needed to swallow in order to reduce tooth decay. So in this study, what they did was for each child on an individual basis, calculate, estimate how much fluoride they were taking in each day, ingesting each day, from toothpaste, from fluoridated water, from food, based upon the levels of fluoride in the food. And what they found was no clear relationship between the amount of fluoride that the kids were swallowing and tooth decay. In their own words, these findings suggest that achieving a caries-free status may have relatively little to do with fluoride intake. That again, should have shaken the faith of those who promote fluoridation, but it's just gone by, like everything else. The claim that swallowing fluoride lowers tooth decay is still unproven. After 68 years, there's never been a randomized control trial, an RCT, which is the gold standard for epidemiology, to demonstrate effectiveness. Not been done. Incredibly. When you think of all the millions and millions of taxpayers' dollars that has been spent on this, and all those assurances that it's effective, they cannot back that up with the gold standard of epidemiology and show us a randomized control study. Instead, we are left with grade B studies, second-rate studies, and the reason they're grade B is there's so many parameters, there are so many different parameters that affect tooth decay that to actually match two communities exactly, except for the amount of fluoride they're getting in the water, is practically impossible to control for all these variables. There's so many variables which affect tooth decay. So the evidence is pretty weak. Now, the second event probably explains everything I've said up to this point on event one. Those studies which didn't find a difference between fluoridated and non-fluoridated, the World Health Organization data which shows no difference in kids between fluoridated and non-fluoridated countries, and the Brunel and Carlos study, and the Warren study. All of these can be explained by this next event. In 1999, the Center of Disease Control, the big promoter of fluoridation in the United States, conceded that the predominant benefit of fluoride was topical, not systemic. And let's have a look at the exact quote so that you know what we're looking at here. This is the big promoter of fluoridation, the Center of Disease Control, Oral Health Division. Fluorides carries preventive properties initially were attributed to changes in enamel during tooth development. This is why pediatricians gave fluoride tablets to pregnant women. This is why they gave drops to babies, all in the hope that the fluoride in the enamel will build up in the teeth under the gums so that when they erupted into the oral cavity, they would be more resistant to acid attack from the bacteria breaking down sugar. That was the mechanism that was believed for 50 years. And then they said, whoops, we're sorry. Laboratory and epidemiologic research suggests that fluoride prevents dental caries predominantly after eruption of the tooth into the mouth, and its actions primarily are topical. Now, if fluoride works primarily on the outside of the tooth and not from inside the body, why swallow fluoride and expose every tissue of the body to a toxic substance when you can brush it on your teeth and spit it out, if you want it? I don't. But if you did, brush it on your teeth and spit it out. This way you not only protect yourself against fluoride's toxic effects, but you also solve the ethical problem. Because if you use that as your strategy, then you're not forcing it on people that don't want it, which is so unacceptable to many people. There are a large number of people out there who say, I don't care if fluoride works. I don't care if it's dangerous. I don't want the government telling me that I have to put this substance in my body when I don't want to put it in my body. That's where just that's one single argument, where you can get around that argument tomorrow. In 1999, then, fluoridation should have ended. Right there, when the #1 promoter of fluoridation admitted it worked topically and not systemically, or predominantly topically, that's when they should have changed their strategy to the one now being used in Scotland. But they didn't. Why not? Event number 3, in 2006, the US National Research Council published its 3-year review. The remarkable thing about this review was that the panel chosen to look at the toxicology of fluoride in water and examine EPA's safe drinking water standards was the first balanced panel ever selected in the United States to look at anything to do with fluoride. They had 3 pro-fluoridation, 3 anti-fluoridation, and 6 who had not declared their position publicly. They expected to get this report out in 1 year, but it took them 3 years. There it is, fluoride in drinking water, a scientific review of EPA standards. You can get this online and search it for free. They showed in this review, and they didn't look at fluoridation per se, their task was to look at fluoride's toxicology with little attention to the dosage involved. They looked at animal studies, they looked at biochemical studies, they looked at clinical trials, they looked at human studies. And what they found is that fluoride causes many health problems. That's not the argument. The argument is whether fluoridation causes any health problems. Or the way I'd like to frame it is this: is there an adequate margin of safety from the levels which we know causing harm in India and China and other places with high natural levels? Is there an adequate margin of safety to protect not the average person, but all our citizens from that effect, drinking fluoridated water? That was the key question. They did not address that in this report. They just delineated what fluoride was capable of doing. Now, on the day this was released, I remember this, I was in Italy at the time, on the day this released, the American Dental Association claimed that the NRC only looked at levels of fluoride between 2 and 4 parts per million, which was not relevant to water fluoridation at 0.7 to 1.2 parts per million. I'll come back to that in a second. 6 days later, the Oral Health Division of the CDC said more or less the same thing. The findings of the NRC report are consistent with CDC's assessment that water is safe and healthy at the levels used for water fluoridation. And then 1 year later, the National Health and Medical Research Council in Australia brushed aside these findings and said, the NAS report refers to the adverse health effects from fluoride, and the reader is alerted to the fact that fluoridation of Australia's drinking water occurs in the range of 0.6 to 1.1 milligrams per litre. With that having been said, they completely ignore the 500 pages of this report. Incredible. These statements by the ADA, CDC, and NHMRC indicate 3 things. 1, they don't know the difference between concentration and dose. It's a self-serving argument which they use again and again and again. They say, show me the study that's been done at 0.7, 0.8 or 1 part per million which has caused harm. And wink, wink, nudge, nudge. They know very well that they're not doing these studies.